Joining us now is Marc Lotter, the Director for Strategic Communications for the Trump campaign. So, Marc, when we talked about mail-in voting, there are concerns when it comes to that, specifically voiced by the president this morning. Can you explain to us a little bit why mail-in voting is a concern for many people?
Well, it's ripe for fraud because you have no idea if the person who is actually filling out that ballot was the person that was intended to fill out that ballot. You don't know if the person that was originally intended to receive that ballot even lives there and is legally eligible to receive the ballot. You can also get into ballot harvesting and other issues where people will go around and intimidate people to vote in a certain direction. So there's a lot of problems with mail-in voting, so much so that in the early 2000s, the federal government did a bipartisan study on this, and even Democrat former President Jimmy Carter, an election security expert, said mail-in voting is ripe for fraud.
And it seems a little bit practical. The more degrees of separation you make between the voter and that voting booth, that it would pose more problems. I mean, that's something as similar as why something as simple as identification laws seem to be a hotly contested issue. It seems pretty practical that you have to show something the same way that you would at a library to check out a book. But I think that you speak to something that maybe speaks to a larger issue, and that's voter turnout. A lot of people just want to see whoever votes for their party come to the ballots a little bit more. But when it comes to the state of Michigan, that was the focus this morning regarding the president's tweet concerning mail-in voting. Gretchen Whitmer is right there, and she's having kind of her own scandal regarding what's going on in that state. Last night, there was an emergency concerning 2 dams, but usually we're talking about the coronavirus pandemic. And she's rumored as being a possible VP for Joe Biden. Would that change anything for the campaign?
Well, in a way, I think it would actually make it easier for the president to carry Michigan again. A lot of people have a lot of problems with the governor and the way she conducted herself during the coronavirus. I mean, let's remember, she made weed legal, but growing seeds and gardening and painting illegal. I mean, she completely overstepped the bounds of what is acceptable in terms of the government lockdowns. So many people were protesting her actions, and if she is his ultimate pick, then that's something that I think that the voters of Michigan are going to have a lot to say about.
And the people in Michigan, too, they're a more diverse demographic than I think a lot of people give them credit for. I mean, of course, you could look in Detroit. That would obviously go more liberal for the candidate. But there's other pockets in the suburbs, as well as the north part of the state, that aren't having the similar outbreak that they're seeing in Detroit. So I think reaching out to those voters are going to be a very big determinant, too, the same way that it was in 2016. But when we talk about Gretchen Whitmer on that, possibly being on that ticket, along with former Vice President Joe Biden, and then matching them up with President Trump and Vice President Mike Pence, does that pose the idea that there may be a more robust debate compared to before, where the president was showing maybe some skepticism about even having debates at all?
Well, I think the biggest concern the president has is to make sure that there's a level playing field, because what we have seen is that a lot of times the Presidential Debate Commission will put on very liberal anti-Trump journalists and make them try to appear like they are unbiased and nonpartisan, which is anything further from the truth. In fact, the president is very much looking forward to debating Joe Biden, and why wouldn't he? I mean, all you have to do is watch Joe Biden's digital feed. You see a candidate who doesn't know the year that 9/11 took place, can't remember how many grandkids he has, had thought he was, negotiating with world leaders who've been dead for decades. I mean, this is something that I think the president openly welcomes, but he wants to make sure there's a fair and balanced playing field.
And I mean, we could even look at the Democratic debates and how we handled those. To be honest, it wasn't as bad as I thought he was going to do, but I think that's because it was a little bit more of a friendly confines, if you will. The other people on the stage never really went at him, I think, the way that they should have, especially Senator Bernie Sanders, when it was just those two at the end. It was a very passive type of debate, and we know we're not going to get that with President Trump. So do you think that when it comes to that, there's going to be more negotiations regarding what media networks are holding these debates? Is that something you're going to be looking at more?
Well, I think that's just something we put them on notice. And the president has also very much put on notice that we expect there to be a fair process. We expect there to be nonpartisan journalists and folks who are going to be moderating these debates. If it's going to be like your typical CNN or MSNBC panel where you have, 8 people who are Democrats, liberals, or confirmed never Trumpers versus one person in the president, that might be something he's going to have to think twice about. But look, we already control the media narrative, the president's social media, the campaign's social media. We reach a larger audience than watch the Super Bowl every time we activate our social media platform. And every night of the week we're doing online events that get more viewership than MSNBC and CNN.
No, and I think that's going to be very important. I can't stress that point enough. I think I talk about it every time that we have a show here, how big the digital arm is going to be this time, even before the coronavirus outbreak, but especially now that things are basically going online. Marc Lotter, always a pleasure having you on. Thanks for joining us tonight.